In the kingdom of Urindor, shadows lingered longer than the day, and the wind carried whispers that only a few could hear. King Kaelin, ruler of this land, walked the cold halls of his stone castle alone. The weight of the crown pressed heavily upon his head, and the eyes of his court often felt like chains. Despite his strength and power, Kaelin had never known peace. Each night, when the world outside sank into darkness, he dreamed. At first, the dreams were fleeting, shapes moving in mist, distant laughter that faded too quickly. But soon a voice began to call to him. It was soft and distant, yet it stirred something deep within him, something he could not name. He did not see the owner of the voice at first. It came as a melody, a song sung in silence, felt rather than heard. And every morning, Kaelin awoke restless, yearning for more, though he did not understand why. Far beyond the city and its towers, in a forest thick with fog and ancient trees, lived a girl named Leora. She could not speak. Her lips were sealed by a curse, one cast when she was very young, leaving her silent in a world of words. Yet in her mind, she sang endlessly. Her thoughts were melodies, stories, and songs that no one could hear. Leora lived with the old witch who had taken her in when the curse was placed. The witch had a crooked back and sharp eyes, but she cared for Leora in her own stern way. She told Leora that one day someone would hear her song. Leora often did not understand what the witch meant, but she hoped it was true. One evening, as the sun bled red into the sky, Kaelin's dream returned. He stood on a high cliff, wind tugging at his dark cloak, and before him floated a figure cloaked in silver light. She sang, though no sound passed her lips. Yet Kaelin could hear her in the hollow space between heartbeats in the quiet of his mind. The melody was neither sad nor happy. It was something older, deeper, a song of longing and hope. Kaelin felt it stir a memory he had never lived, a life he had never had. He reached out, trying to touch the figure, but she vanished, leaving only a feeling of emptiness. When he awoke, Kaelin was no longer certain of what was real. He walked the halls, restless, trying to shake the memory of the dream, yet he carried a strange warmth in his chest. The court noticed a change. His steps were slower, more careful, and his eyes often seemed to look at something invisible. Meanwhile, in the forest, Leora felt a pull she could not explain. That night, as she curled beneath the thick blankets of her small hut, a voice sang in her mind. It was not her own, but someone else's, a deep, commanding voice filled with sadness and longing. She knew it was not a dream. She reached out in her thoughts, hoping to respond, hoping that her silent song could meet his. The next morning, Kaelin walked to the castle balcony, gazing at the horizon. He could not name the feeling, but he knew the voice was real. Someone was calling to him, though he did not know who. He gave orders to send scouts into the northern forests, a place where no traveler dared to tread. The forest was alive with secrets, trees twisted into strange shapes, their roots forming walls that seemed to move on their own. Leora walked carefully along the hidden paths she had known since childhood. She could feel the forest breathing around her, watching, protecting. The pull toward the king was strong, but she did not know why. Days passed. Kaelin's scouts returned, speaking of mist and shadows, of strange melodies carried on the wind. Yet none had seen a girl or heard a song that touched the soul. Kaelin was undeterred. He decided to go himself to follow the voice that had claimed his dreams. At the edge of the forest, Kaelin dismounted his horse, the leather of his armor creaking softly. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying a faint note of a melody. He closed his eyes, listening, letting it guide him. Every step forward was a step into the unknown. Leora, hidden among the trees, felt the presence of the king before she saw him. Her heart beat quickly. She wanted to run, yet something inside her told her to stay. The pull between them was stronger than fear. Suddenly, a figure appeared before her. Kaelin's dark cloak shimmered like night itself. His eyes, sharp and commanding, softened as they fell upon her. He did not speak, and she could not, yet somehow words were exchanged. A strange understanding passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement that their meeting was not by chance. Kaelin studied her face. There was something ethereal in her presence, a quiet power that did not need words. He knelt slightly, not in submission, but in recognition of something greater than himself. Leora's mind hummed with the song she had carried for so long, and for the first time she felt it reach another soul. The air around them seemed to shimmer. Birds fell silent, and even the forest held its breath. Kaelin felt a warmth he had never known, a connection that went beyond touch, beyond sight. The world felt smaller and yet more vast than ever, but the moment was fragile. Kalen knew he could not stay, that danger always lurked in the shadows. The forest had many eyes, and not all were friendly. He needed to understand this girl, to learn the source of her power and the meaning behind the song that haunted his dreams. As night fell, Leora stepped back into the shadows, reluctant but cautious. Kalen watched her retreat, wishing he could follow, yet knowing that this meeting was only the beginning. He returned to his castle, carrying the memory of her eyes, her presence, and the song that lingered in his mind. That night, Kalen's dreams returned, more vivid than ever. He stood on the cliff again, and this time the girl was closer. She reached out to him, and though she did not speak, he felt the melody of her soul. Then, as if the world itself had shifted, a small pendant appeared on the ground before him in the dream. It was delicate, silver, engraved with a rune he did not recognize. When Kalen awoke, his hand rested on a small object beside his pillow. The pendant. His heart raced. It was real. Someone had placed it there. Someone had reached across the distance of forest and castle, across dreams and waking life. Kalen held the pendant tightly, feeling the pulse of magic that seemed to flow from it. He knew the girl existed, and that her silence was not weakness. Her voice was stronger than any sword, more dangerous than any enemy. He had to find her to understand her, to hear her song fully. Leora, in her hut far away, felt the pull of the pendant in her dreams. She did not know how it had reached him or why. But she knew one thing: the voice she had longed to reach had finally heard her. The bond had begun, and in a world of shadows, power, and ancient curses, this bond was more dangerous and more beautiful than either of them could understand. As the first stars appeared in the sky, the forest whispered a warning. Their connection was no longer private. Eyes dark and watchful were upon them, and the story of the silent Omega and the Alpha King had only just begun. The forest of Urindor was alive with quiet magic. Mist curled around the trees like ghostly fingers, and the ground was soft with moss and fallen leaves. Birds had stopped their songs, and even the wind seemed to pause. Here, in this hidden world, Leora moved as silently as the shadows themselves. She felt the pull before she saw him. The presence of Kalen, the Alpha King who had haunted her dreams, was near, and it filled the forest with tension. Her heart beat fast, though she could not make a sound. Her mind hummed with the melody she had carried for so long, and the pull of his voice guided her steps. Kalen entered the forest with a small group of guards, though none dared to approach too closely. The trees seemed to resist them, their branches twisting and reaching as if warning the strangers to turn back. Kalen's dark cloak trailed behind him, and his eyes searched the shadows with unyielding focus. Every step he took was measured, but his heart was quickened by a strange hope, the hope of finally finding the voice that had haunted his nights. It was not long before they met. Leora had hidden behind the trunk of an ancient oak, peering out with cautious curiosity. Kalen's eyes fell upon her almost immediately. There was a pull he could not explain, a recognition that went beyond reason. She was smaller than he had imagined, delicate yet radiant, like a flame held in glass. He took a slow step forward, careful not to frighten her. "I know you are here," he said, his voice low, commanding, yet soft enough not to break the fragile air between them. Leora did not move. She could not answer, but her mind reached out in response. A melody flowed from her thoughts, weaving around him like silver threads. Kalen felt her presence wrap around him, and for a moment he believed the forest had disappeared, leaving only the two of them. The air seemed to shimmer. The guards watched nervously from a distance, sensing that something more than mere words passed between the king and the girl. Kalen extended his hand, not as a king to a subject, but as a man seeking a connection he had longed for in dreams. Leora tilted her head, her eyes wide but not afraid. Slowly, she reached toward him, not with her body but with her mind, sending another wave of her silent song. Kalen felt a surge of emotion he had never known. His heart ached and soared at the same time. He realized then that her silence was not emptiness. Her voice, though not spoken, was more powerful than any words he had ever heard. For a while, they stood like this, connected by soundless song, neither daring to break the spell. And then a sudden rustle in the trees shattered the moment. One of Kalen's guards shouted, and shadows moved at the edge of the clearing. A group of masked figures emerged, their weapons glinting in the dim light. They were assassins, sent by a rival kingdom that sought to weaken Kalen's rule. Kalen drew his sword, its black steel humming with the power of his bloodline. Leora instinctively stepped forward, though her lips could not form a warning. The melody in her mind swelled, a wave of pure emotion and magic. The trees around them seemed to bend, roots twisting and reaching to block the intruders. The first assassin lunged. Kalen met him with a swing of his sword, but more appeared from the shadows. Leora focused, sending her song outward. The melody struck the intruders, confusing their minds, slowing their movements. The forest itself seemed to rise in her defense. Kalen glanced at her, eyes wide with astonishment. You saved me," he said, though her voice could not answer. Her silent power had not only protected him, but also revealed the depth of her strength. The battle was brief but fierce. The assassins were driven back by the combination of Kalen's skill and Leora's magic, disappearing into the mist from which they had come. When the forest was quiet again, Kalen turned to Leora. "You are more than I imagined," he said, his voice husky with awe. "Your song, it is not just a dream, it is real, and it is dangerous." Leora stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. She could feel his heart racing, his confusion, his longing. In the safety of the forest, she allowed herself to smile. It was small, shy, and almost imperceptible, but Kalen saw it. He felt it. They were two souls drawn together, bound by something neither fully understood yet both could feel. A bond had formed, fragile and new, but already strong enough to shake the world around them. Kalen sat on a fallen log, the night settling around them. "I must know you," he said quietly. "I must understand this bond between us, but first you must trust me." Leora did not speak. Instead, she reached into her pocket and drew out a small pendant, the same one that had appeared in his dream. She held it toward him. Kalen took it, feeling the magic hum beneath his fingers. It was a key, he realized, a connection between them that could not be broken by distance or silence. "You are mine to protect," Kalen whispered, though he knew he could not claim her in the usual sense. She was no ordinary girl. Her silence made her mysterious, powerful, and beyond his reach in many ways. Yet he felt that destiny had brought them together. Night deepened, and the forest seemed to watch them, alive with unseen eyes. Kalen knew he could not stay here forever, but neither could he leave. "I will return," he promised. "I will not let you be alone." Leora watched him disappear into the shadows, her heart full of fear and hope. Her song had found its listener, but the world was dangerous, and their connection had drawn attention. The next day, Kalen could think of little else. The memory of her eyes, the pull of her song, and the pendant weighed on him. He summoned his advisors, but even their most careful words could not shake the certainty he felt. There was something extraordinary about the girl in the forest, and he needed to learn more. Meanwhile, Leora felt the pull of his presence even when he was far away. Her silent melodies reached across the distance, searching for him, and each note carried hope, fear, and longing. Days passed, and Kalen returned to the forest, bringing only a few trusted guards. Each meeting was brief, cautious, and filled with unspoken words. They could not speak, yet their minds and hearts connected in ways that words could never capture. During one encounter, Kalen finally asked, "Why are you silent?" Leora did not answer with words. Instead, she hummed a melody, soft and pure, that wrapped around him like a warm breeze. Kalen closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. He understood more from her song than he could from any explanation. Her silence was not weakness, it was strength, and her voice, though hidden, was a force that could not be ignored. That night, Kalen returned to his castle, carrying a sense of wonder and unease. The bond with Leora had grown stronger, and the dreams he had now felt more like memories than fantasies. He knew that their connection was dangerous, but he could not deny its pull. In her forest hut, Leora stared at the pendant he had left with her. She touched it gently, feeling the warmth of his hand in her mind. The forest whispered around her, warning her of danger, but she could not turn away. The pull between them was stronger than fear, stronger than caution, stronger than the world itself. But danger was closer than they realized. Shadows lurked beyond the trees, watching, waiting for the moment to strike. The bond they shared had drawn attention, and not all who watched had good intentions. As the moon rose high, casting silver light across the forest, Leora felt a presence behind her. She turned quickly but saw nothing. The song in her mind shivered, warning her that the world was not safe. Someone or something was coming. Far away, Kalen dreamed again. He saw her closer than ever, reaching out with her silent song. But the vision shifted. Dark shapes closed in, and he felt a coldness that made his chest tighten. He awoke with a start, sweat on his brow, and the certainty that their meeting had set events into motion that could not be stopped. The Alpha King and the Silent Omega were bound together now. Their connection was real, powerful, and dangerous. And as the night deepened, both knew that their lives and the fate of the kingdom were changing forever. The first battle had been survived, but the next challenge was already coming. Shadows, both human and supernatural, would test their bond, and the silent song of Leora would have to rise louder than the world's threats if they were to survive. And somewhere in the depths of the forest, a pair of eyes glimmered, watching, waiting, and smiling at the unfolding story. The journey of the Omega and the Alpha King was only beginning, and the dangers ahead would demand courage, trust, and the awakening of powers neither fully understood. The days in the kingdom of Urendor grew colder as autumn crept across the land. Golden leaves fell from the trees, carpeting the forest floor with their crisp scent. Yet within this quiet season, the forest where Leora lived seemed untouched by time. Shadows moved softly, and magic hummed through every root, every stone. Leora had grown stronger in the weeks since Kaelin first entered her forest. She could feel the pull of her silent song more clearly than ever before. With every meeting, the bond between her and the Alpha King deepened, threading them together with invisible cords of emotion and power. Kaelin returned often, sometimes with his guards, sometimes alone. Each time he approached her not as a king commanding a subject, but as a man seeking understanding. He observed her, noting the way her hands moved, the way her eyes held the quiet power of someone who had endured long years of isolation. "You are stronger than I imagined," Kaelin said one evening, sitting across from her in the clearing where moonlight fell like silver rain. "Your silence, it is a shield, a sword, and a song all at once." Leora looked at him, her eyes reflecting the light of the moon. She could not speak, yet she lifted her hands, letting her mind reach out. A soft melody flowed from her, delicate and precise, threading through the air and wrapping around Kaelin's mind. He closed his eyes, letting it fill him. Each note carried not just sound, but emotion, hope, fear, longing, courage. He had heard it in dreams before, but now it was stronger, real, and unmistakably alive. "You saved me before," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "And now I must save you." Leora's song swelled, a wave of quiet power that echoed through the trees. For the first time, she felt that her silence was not a limitation, it was a gift. She could communicate, fight, and protect, all without words. And Kaelin understood, as if he had always known, as if the bond between them was written in the stars. But the bond also came with danger. The pendant that had first connected them thrummed constantly against her chest, a reminder that their meeting had been noticed. Forces beyond the forest watched, whispering in the dark, plotting against the king and the Silent Omega. One morning, Kaelin arrived earlier than usual. He found Leora training, not with a sword, but with her mind. She could move small objects through the force of her song, lifting stones and twigs, shaping the wind in small curls that danced around her fingers. Her magic was raw, yet beautiful, and Kaelin watched in awe. "You are learning fast," he said. "Soon the world will not be able to ignore you, but you must also be careful. The stronger you grow, the more attention you will attract." Leora nodded, though her gesture was quiet. Her mind sent a soft ripple of agreement, and Kaelin felt it like warmth against his chest. For the first time, he realized that their bond allowed them to communicate without words, to share emotions, fears, and courage. The tranquility did not last. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, Kaelin and Leora sensed a new presence in the forest. The shadows moved differently, darker, more deliberate. It was no longer simple intruders or curious animals. Something watched, patient and calculating. "You feel it too," Kaelin said, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword. "Something approaches." Leora focused, sending a warning through her song. The air shimmered, the trees bending slightly as if preparing for what was coming. And then from the deepest shadows, a figure emerged, a messenger from the rival kingdom, cloaked and masked, carrying a scroll sealed with black wax. Kaelin approached carefully. "Why do you come here?" he demanded. The messenger bowed slightly. "A warning for the king of Urendor. The girl you protect is no ordinary child. Her magic, her silence, it is tied to prophecies older than your kingdom. You cannot shield her forever." Kaelin's eyes narrowed. "And what do you gain by this warning?" "The world is changing," the messenger said, voice calm, almost cold. "Those who cannot hear her song will fear it, and fear can destroy everything." The figure left as silently as it had come, disappearing into the mist. Kalen looked at Leora, feeling the weight of the warning pressing down. You are tied to something far greater than either of us, and now others know. Leora's eyes widened slightly. The melody of her mind shifted, tense and anxious. The forest seemed to tremble with her fear, and Kalen felt it as if it were his own. He reached out, placing a hand lightly over hers. The warmth of his touch steadied her, and she allowed herself to breathe. You are not alone, he said quietly. I will stand with you always, no matter what comes. That night they camped in the forest, sitting near a small fire. Leora's song hummed softly, protective and calming. Kalen watched her, realizing that he had never felt so alive, so aware of another person's soul. It was more than attraction, more than longing. It was connection, pure and deep, forged in silence and strengthened by trust. Yet even as they sat together, the forest whispered warnings. Shadows moved at the edges of their firelight. Eyes watched from the treetops, unseen but alert. The bond they shared was now a beacon, and not all who saw it wished them well. Days turned into weeks, and Kalen began to teach Leora to control her power more precisely. She could move larger objects now, direct her song to calm animals, even bend small streams of water with the force of her thoughts. Her magic was awakening, and with it, her confidence. You are learning to speak without words, Kalen said one afternoon as she lifted a fallen branch with a single gesture. But you must also learn to fight with your mind and heart. Your song is a weapon, Leora, and one day it may be the only thing that can save us both. Leora focused, feeling the truth of his words. Her mind sent out a wave of music, bending the branches of the trees around them, weaving them into shapes that formed a protective barrier. Kalen watched, amazed, as the forest itself became a shield under her control. But then, as if in response to their growing power, the forest trembled. A cold wind swept through the trees, carrying whispers that were not part of the natural world. Shadows moved faster now, darker and more solid. Kalen's hand instinctively went to his sword, but he felt the pull of Leora's mind. They are coming, her melody warned him. Not just spies, more danger, death. Kalen nodded, his jaw tightening. We will face them together. Your song, my sword, nothing can break us if we are united. And so they prepared. The forest became a place of strategy and training, of whispered songs and silent gestures. Kalen taught her how to defend herself, how to anticipate attacks, while Leora taught him to listen not just with his ears but with his heart. Their bond grew, unspoken yet unbreakable. Then one evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in streaks of gold and crimson, the first real threat arrived. A group of riders, cloaked in black and armed with spears, emerged from the mist. They were fast, precise, and determined. Kalen and Leora did not flee. They stood together in the clearing, ready for what was coming. Leora's song rose, a melody that twisted the air and bent the shadows. The riders faltered, confused by the unseen force, but they pressed on. Kalen met them with his sword, moving with a strength born of fear, duty, and determination. Together, their bond became a shield and a weapon, each movement in perfect sync. For a moment, it seemed as if nothing could touch them. But then, from the edge of the clearing, a dark figure stepped forward. Taller than any human, cloaked in shadows that seemed alive, it moved with a confidence that froze even Kalen in place. Leora's song faltered slightly, a note of fear threading through the melody. Kalen felt the danger deep in his bones. We have faced many, he whispered, but this is different. The figure did not speak, did not attack. It simply watched, its presence cold and powerful. Kalen's heart raced. He realized that the world they had known, the forest, the kingdom, even their bond, was only the beginning. Beyond this, forces stirred that were older and darker than anything they could imagine. Leora's eyes met Kalen's, wide and shining. He reached for her hand, feeling her tremble with the weight of what was coming. We will face it together, he said firmly, no matter what comes. And as the night deepened, the shadowed figure stepped closer, and the wind carried a whisper that chilled them both. The silent song will awaken more than hearts, it will awaken destiny. The forest trembled. The bond between the Alpha King and the Omega had grown stronger, but so had the threats surrounding them. Their journey was far from over, and the dangers ahead would demand courage, trust, and the full power of their connection. The story of the silent Omega and the Alpha King was only just beginning, and the shadows waiting in the forest promised that their next challenge would be unlike any they had faced before. The night was thick with fog, and the moon barely pierced the mist that clung to the forest. Floor, Leora and Kalen stood at the edge of a clearing, their breaths visible in the cold air. The shadowed figure from before had returned, accompanied by a host of dark, whispering shapes that moved like living smoke among the trees. Kalen's hand rested on the hilt of his sword. Every instinct told him to strike, yet he knew that this enemy was unlike any they had faced. These were not mere assassins or spies. They were creatures born of darkness, drawn to Leora's silent song. And now their power had grown strong enough to threaten the entire kingdom. Leora stood beside him, eyes wide but resolute. She could feel the pendant against her chest, humming with magic that connected her to Kalen. For the first time, she realized the full extent of her power. Her silence had been a cage, but it had also been a shield, a conduit for strength that even she could barely control. Kalen turned to her. "Whatever comes, we face it together," he said firmly. His dark eyes met hers, and she felt the weight of his promise. Not as a king to a subject, but as a man to the one who had touched his soul. She nodded, letting her thoughts flow into the melody of her mind. The song rose, soft at first, then growing in volume and strength. Trees bent with the rhythm, shadows twisted and recoiled, and the dark creatures hesitated, sensing the power that moved like a tide from her very being. Kalen moved with precision, striking and parrying, his sword guided not just by skill but by the bond they shared. Each movement of his blade seemed to echo the pulses of Leora's song, and together they became a force no enemy could withstand. The dark figure stepped forward, taller and more imposing than before. Its presence chilled the forest, bending the mist around it. Kalen felt a shiver run down his spine. "This one, it is different," he whispered to Leora. Her song wavered slightly. The creature's shadow reached toward her, and Kalen rushed to stand before her. "Stay close," he shouted, though his words were more for his own courage than hers. Leora took a deep breath, focusing all her strength. She closed her eyes and let the song pour out from her soul. Unlike before, this time her voice, not her lips but the resonance within her mind, spoke with clarity, shaping the world around them. The shadow recoiled, shrieking in silence as if her melody cut through its very essence. Kalen pressed forward, driving the creatures back with precision and strength, his every move harmonizing with her invisible notes. They were no longer separate. They were two halves of the same force, one guided by the blade, the other by the unspoken song. The shadowed figure faltered, and Leora's melody strengthened. She realized something terrifying and beautiful. Her silence had been a preparation. Now she could speak, not aloud, but in a way that moved the world. The trees themselves responded, forming walls of roots and branches that struck at the darkness. Kalen watched her, awe and love mingling in his heart. "You are more than I ever dreamed," he whispered. The figure shrieked, its dark form flickering as if it could not withstand the unity of their bond. Kalen's sword struck true, cutting through the shadow, but it was Leora's song that shattered it completely. The forest seemed to sigh, the mist lifting as the creatures dissolved into nothingness. For a long moment, silence fell. Only the whisper of the wind and the soft rustle of leaves could be heard. Kalen lowered his sword and turned to Leora. "You did it," he said softly, his voice breaking with emotion. "You are extraordinary." Leora opened her eyes, glowing with a faint light from the power she had released. She smiled, this time with a freedom she had never known. Her song had found its voice, and the forest itself had listened. Kalen reached out and took her hand. The warmth of his touch grounded her, and she realized that her silence had never been a barrier. It had been the path to this moment. Her gift, her song, and her bond with him had grown stronger than any darkness could break. They spent the rest of the night together in the forest, not speaking, but connected more deeply than ever. Every thought, every emotion, every fear and hope flowed between them in a melody only they could hear. The next morning, Kalen returned to the castle, and Leora followed at his side. The kingdom, unaware of the battle that had unfolded in the forest, continued its daily rhythms, but the bond between the Alpha King and the silent Omega had already begun to change the world. Kalen faced his court, not with the arrogance of a ruler, but with the humility of a man who had seen the power of trust, courage, and love. The advisors whispered, noticing the difference in him, the softening of his eyes, the determination in his steps, the quiet confidence that came from knowing he was no longer alone. Leora remained close, her presence quiet yet commanding. Though she could now speak in the resonance of her song, she chose to remain silent among others, letting her power and presence speak for her. The kingdom learned to respect her without words, drawn to the mystery and strength that seemed to radiate from her very being. But even as the days passed, both Kaelin and Leora knew that their journey was not over. The pendant still hummed with magic, a reminder of forces beyond their understanding, and the shadowed figure they had faced hinted at larger dangers yet to come. One evening, as they walked through the castle gardens, Kaelin stopped and looked at Leora. "You have given me more than I could have ever imagined," he said. "You have taught me that power is not only in strength, but in connection. And that love can awaken even the deepest silence." Leora's eyes glimmered. She reached out, and for the first time her hand rested over his heart. The bond between them pulsed stronger than ever, a rhythm that spoke of destiny, courage, and unity. Suddenly the pendant she wore pulsed brightly, its light filling the garden. A soft hum rose in the air, carrying a message she could feel but not yet understand. Kaelin felt it too, a whisper in the wind that promised new challenges and new beginnings. "The silent song will continue," the wind seemed to say, "but now it will awaken hearts, minds, and destinies." Kaelin pulled her close, their foreheads touching. "Whatever comes," he said, "we will face it together, always." And Leora, feeling the truth of their connection, let her song rise. Not for the forest, not for the kingdom, but for the bond that had brought them together. It was a song of courage, of love, of triumph over fear. It was the song of the Alpha King and the silent Omega, and it would echo far beyond the walls of Urindor. The castle gates opened to the first light of dawn. The kingdom stirred, unaware that its fate had been altered by a girl who could not speak and a king who had listened in dreams. And as the sun rose over the mountains, the world seemed a little brighter, a little safer, and full of possibilities. Kaelin and Leora stood together, looking toward the horizon. They had survived darkness, faced dangers, and discovered the strength within themselves and each other. The bond they shared was unbreakable, their love unspoken yet undeniable, and their journey only beginning. The pendant glowed softly against Leora's chest, a reminder that their connection was more than magic, it was destiny. And as the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a soft melody only they could hear, both knew the truth. Their song had not ended, it had only begun.